I feel like the coming crash could be extended for many more years. I felt like the crash was coming in 2010 and 2012, but it never happened. What do you feel is different this time?
Oh, Harold, I actually feel like there's a lot different this time because the system actually died back then. So it's no wonder that you felt like the crash was coming. I'm not exactly sure which crash you're talking about, if it's the stock market crash, if it's the bond market crash, if it's the real estate market crash. What's really different this time is the size of the balance sheet and the limited tools that they have. And I don't think that it can be extended for many more years because, quite honestly, the most significant thing that has been happening has been the loss of credibility with the central banks. First, the Bank of England, they were anticipating, they were using, let me back up here for a second, okay? After the crisis in 2008, then central banks started using forward guidance to let the markets know what they were going to do so that they could get into a position to benefit from it or take lower losses, either way. But, so that's a tool that they have been using quite heavily for a great number of years. All of a sudden, Bank of England surprised the markets, the Federal Reserve surprised the markets, and now, Christine Lagarde has just come out and said, nope, no more forward guidance. We're going to do it on a moment-by-moment basis. We're going to make our decisions. So Wall Street now has absolutely no idea what the central banks are going to do. But more important than that is that they know they can't necessarily trust what they're saying because you've had three key central banks prove that they can't trust them. And it's really interesting because the case of the not Bank of England, but the Federal Reserve and Christine Lagarde, it's like, well, we hope that what we do is credible. Well, no, they gave up their credibility. Now, that is a key tool for them. So for them to volunteer their credibility of Wall Street tells you how panicked they are and the fact that they don't have any choices left. So can it go on and extend it for many more years? No way. There's no way on God's green earth that it can, because the only thing holding this together is the confidence and that credibility. So, yeah, no.
Well, so let's say they played the same game, right? That we know that they're good at doing, which is basically printing tons of money.
Correct.
Lots of liquidity into the markets since 2008, since the system died, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what kept it on life support.
4 times the amount of debt in that period of time. So let's say that they have the same game plan, but now we've noticed that the printing, the liquidity thing is accelerating, right? We've seen it really dramatically pick up. Is there a point at which that you feel, is it 40 trillion in debt? Is it 50 trillion in debt? Is it 60 trillion in debt? Because that's going to continue to accelerate. Do you feel like there's a point at which mathematically we go, okay, this is where the confidence gets lost?
It's not necessarily mathematical. It's more emotional. And so what I think is going to happen is we're watching the real estate market begin its implosion. We're watching the stock market clearly with volatility begin its implosion. And with the rise of interest rates, we're also watching the bond markets, kind of more schizophrenic, right? Because if the Fed is going to raise rates, which they have to do for even some semblance of credibility, they have to raise the rates. But how much pain will they tolerate? Right? How far down will they allow any of these markets to go before they try and go in and put a floor underneath them? And then they will print, like I've said this and I'm sure of it, they will make the level of printing that they did in 2020 look like chump change. So what that will do is that will escalate the inflation. And then people feel that, right? They feel that when they go to the grocery store or the gas pump or wherever they go, they feel that inflation. It's that inflation that will determine the public's loss of confidence.
Yep.
So I don't think that there's like a specific number. I think it's more the inflation number.
If inflation gets so out of their control that people then begin to lose confidence that the central bank can even do anything to maintain it, then that's when. Also, another piece I've been hearing a lot of chatter recently about too, which is, we've been talking about it since 2009, which is the loss of the world reserve currency.
Oh, yeah.
A lot accelerated by China, Russia, India. Now Iran, I guess, is coming into the BRICS nations and negotiating contracts with the Saudis to not use the petrodollar anymore and utilize their own currencies to do so, which then would send a lot of those dollars that we have printed back to the United States, which would then only exacerbate the inflation problem, right?
Exactly.
So that could definitely be a trigger point.
Exactly. And as I recently showed in one of my videos, there are a number of countries that have been escalating their interest rates at a much faster pace than certainly, we have, or the ECB has, or the Bank of England has, and yet they still can't slow down that inflation rate. So even by talking about raising rates to slow down the inflation, and what else did they say? Well, you know what else is going to slow down inflation? We need higher unemployment, because we don't like the workers being able to go in and say, I need this amount of a raise. They don't like that at all, because that's what caused the inflation. That's garbage. I don't believe that for 1 second, so I just want you to be clear on that. It's all the money printing, the hyperinflation, the hyperinflated level of currency that they printed, that they kept in the stock market, the bond market, the real estate market, that is now seeping back in. And the other thing, when you talk about liquidity is the ability to buy and sell something without moving the price very much, right? So what we're really hearing is how bad liquidity is. Even with all that new money that the central banks pumped into the system, we're still seeing dislocations in treasury bonds, the foundation of the financial system. And you also made a very good point about the loss of status of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. Though I don't personally think that it's going to go to any one country. The power is shifting, no doubt about that. But I still think the SDR is like more logical, because it's a basket of currencies, and they could technically include every currency.
Right. And I would imagine the central bankers, it gives them even more control by going to that currency than any other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, the West, we showed our hand. Cutting Russia off from the SWIFT system basically told every country out there, if we don't like what you do, we will cut you off. And that kind of goes to the mantra, to be honest with you, and how I've been saying forever that we need to be as independent and self-sufficient. You look at what's happening with between Russia and Europe with gas. So, basically, if Russia says, no more gas, which is essentially what they're doing, well, if you're dependent on them, then you're in trouble. If you have your own supply of gas, all right, then they go away. It doesn't really matter to you. So whether you're on a country level or an individual level, that's what we all have to do, because who has your best interests at heart more than you do? Right?
Yep.
If you like this clip and you want to watch the full video, just click right here. And to subscribe, click right here.